You're listening to Big World Network.
Just Kill Me, Season 2, Episode 5, Information. Written by Wendy Herman. Read by Wendy Herman. Trevor and I were both frozen in time, speechless. Director Pixley had hired a mentally unstable juvenile delinquent to kidnap Freya? Why? I couldn't believe my ears. Jabba was certain, however, that his lovely mute informant had overheard correctly. Had he targeted Freya specifically, or was Logan just supposed to grab any agent? No, the young man hadn't even hesitated when he took Freya, so that I could only assume the decision had already been made for him. I suddenly had a skullcap headache. What the hell is going on here? Then I remembered Leon for the first time since that morning. Logan, whom I assumed was the shorter of the four men who had taunted me and tried to touch Freya, both of which I planned to make him pay for, had practically boasted about killing Leon when he had us captive at the old bridge. What had really happened to my most trusted informant? Had Pixley ordered the boy to kill him, which is what I had assumed his fate had been that morning? Maybe Jabba knew something. Jabba, this agent, she and I were meeting someone this morning when your boys showed up instead. Do you know anything about the other man? Apologies, Agent Ripley, but Jabba does not know. We needed to find Leon, and fast. We started with Leon's place, a dive of an apartment in a dilapidated complex, unofficially known as Hooker Hill for obvious reasons. The actual name was Highland Hills, but the sign was so old and faded the letters couldn't be deciphered. I smiled as we leapt out of the car and headed toward Leon's one-bedroom catastrophe, remembering a few years back when Freya had been determined to raise money to clean up the complex. Not surprisingly, she had trouble getting her manicured and tummy-tucked friends to help out. Most of them just wanted to pretend the place didn't exist. But she was on a mission, and there was no discouraging her when she was so focused like that. She organized a fundraiser and had a whopping $200 to show for it at the end of the day, most of which was from me and her friend Talia, and she had eventually been forced to take another route. She petitioned the city to do something about the problem, as she euphemized, but unbeknownst to her, the city actually owned the whole complex, under a made-up name, of course, and blocked her at every turn. In time, she gave up, though very reluctantly. I felt so bad for her. She was such an idealist, one of the many things I adored about her, and had these grand plans to help all the poor young girls who were trapped in the would-be human trafficking that was going on. I would never tell her the city secretly owned Highland Hills. I wasn't allowed to call it the other name in her presence, because of the reason the city secretly owned Highland Hills. So they would have a place to entertain VIPs who were into that sort of thing, which was a surprising number of them apparently. It was definitely not something the mayor wanted common knowledge, and I liked my job, so I kept my mouth shut. We reached Leon's door, and Trevor put his hand up to stop me in my tracks. He pointed to the door. It was hanging open, the doorknob broken and dangling from the hole it should have been occupying. We drew our weapons, and this time I led. The living room was a mess, but no more than usual, and Leon was nowhere to be seen. We silently made our way to the bedroom, and heard a noise, like a lawnmower or one of those espresso machines. And there he was, asleep on his bed. A bed that had no covers, but did have stains on the mattress that made me think of an 80s horror movie. I was so relieved to see him, though, snoring away, that I sat down on the potential health hazard and sighed with relief, holstering my weapon as I did so. I roughly shook him until he stopped snoring and opened his eyes. He rubbed them for a second and then looked around frantically, as if he had no idea where he was. "What the—" he exclaimed. "How did I get here? What did you do to me?" "Leon, you're in your apartment. You must have been having a pretty intense dream," I teased. That didn't seem to calm him down at all. "Rip? What's going on? I was on my way to meet you and—" He trailed off, lost in thought. Yeah, you never made it, but 4 nice young men came in your place, I said irritably. I was through playing games. We needed to find Freya before nightfall. Leon, what happened? Did Logan pay you off? He looked hurt by my comment. Logan? Man, that dude is psycho. I'm telling you, I was on my way to the old warehouse to meet you, and... Warehouse? I interrupted. Idiot. We were supposed to meet at the old bridge north of Holloway. Well, yeah, at first, but then you texted me to go to the warehouse instead. Shit. Was Pixley playing with all of us? I suddenly felt like we were being watched, and when an FBI agent had that feeling, it was usually true. Leon, what time did you get the text from me? He stared at me for a minute, rubbed his eyes, and then pulled his iPhone, courtesy of the United States government, out of his jeans pocket. Let me see. He scrolled through his messages. How many friends did this guy have? I thought I was the only one who could stand the smell. Then he nodded. Here we go. 8:45 this morning. I wasn't even awake yet, man. Have some respect for other people's schedules. I smacked him hard in the back of the head, and his greasy dishwater brown hair fell in front of his face. He deserved it. I snatched the phone out of his hand and read. Damn. The text had inexplicably come from my phone, and there were just a few people I knew who had the technology to hack into an encrypted government cell phone. I stood and tossed his phone onto the mattress. You know your front door is broken? That surprised him. I quickly made a decision. Get cleaned up, Leon. You're coming with us. Trevor smacked me, but I ignored his protest. I had a strong feeling Leon was still in danger, and it was my job to keep him alive. He had to come with us. Oh, man, I want to go back to sleep, he yawned. Why do I have to come with you? Because I think whoever went out of their way to keep you from making our meeting this morning may have drugged you, and then broke your doorknob to get you in here. We're going to take you to the lab and have your blood tested. He laughed at this, and Trevor and I both knew why, but I let him tell us anyway. Rip, you know drugs have no effect on me. He was right. His numerous attempts at becoming a drug addict. This guy had a past no one would blame him for wanting to block out. All failed miserably until finally he had to accept the fact that he was somehow immune. He couldn't even get drunk, the poor bastard. He was like Captain America, except smelly, undernourished, and not very brave. I like to think I had something to do with the fact that he was now proud of his superpower, although I advised him to never tell anyone from the seedy underbelly where he usually hung out. It could be dangerous information in the wrong hands, and he was an FBI informant, which was not an inherently safe job to begin with. He closed his eyes and banged the center of his scrawny chest with his fist. Constitution of iron, dude! I grabbed his fist and pulled him to his feet. That's when the smell really hit us, and even Trevor recoiled. He wasn't usually bothered by something like body odor, but this was an extra special blend of stink, stank, and stunk. Apparently, the only way Leon could block out his bad memories was by never bathing. Effective, because one whiff, and I swear I lost 1989. I covered my nose with my other hand and pulled him toward the bathroom. I flung him through the doorway and closed the door between us. Dude, take a shower, and hurry up! We left headquarters, and Trevor drove, making it impossible to not put our seatbelts on, and we headed for Jabba's once again. Leon, who smelled a lot better, had tested positive for drugs all right. Whoever wanted to keep him away from the bridge that morning had given him a massive amount of caffeine. That's right, caffeine. Enough to keep any normal human awake for a month, if it didn't stop your heart first. Because Leon was special, his system had been overloaded, causing him to skip right past the caffeine high and right into the caffeine crash. Whoever drugged him had either been trying to kill him in a unique and creative way, or knew Leon's secret. And that made sense if Director Pixley was behind it all. He still had a lot of the popular drug coursing through his veins, and the rate at which his mouth was now moving was proof of that. I was starting to wish Logan had killed him. The guy wouldn't shut up. We pulled into Jabba's employee lot for the second time that day, and escorted the still-talking Leon inside. Jabba had agreed to take Leon in temporarily to maintain our friendly relationship, but he was also always eager to recruit new family members. I strongly suggested Jabba not try to adopt him, but I knew Leon would be safe in the palace for the time being. After a wham-bam thank-you-ma'am drop-off of our snitch, Trevor and I left Jabba's with an eerie quiet emanating throughout the car. "Where to next?" I finally asked, knowing what he was going to say. "Pixley." "Yep, just what I thought." We didn't have any other leads anyway. Jabba hadn't heard from Logan since we'd talked to him last, nor had we been able to locate the Cadillac. Might as well march into the regional director of the FBI's office and point-blank accuse him of hiring a known criminal to kidnap an agent on her first assignment. It was a life-changing day for both of us. I checked my watch. 4:15. 6 hours since the punk Logan had taken Freya. It seemed like a lifetime. Then something occurred to me. "Hey, don't you need to go home for the boys?" I asked. Not that I thought he had forgotten, but... Okay, I was a tiny bit worried that his 3 children had slipped his mind. I was their godfather, after all, and I was allowed to worry. But I don't think Trevor saw it that way. His hands clenched the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. He responded without looking at me. "You'd love that, wouldn't you?" he said bitterly. I remained silent. He had a right to be angry. I had tried to seduce his wife that morning, consciously or not. He gave a labored sigh and relaxed his hand slightly. "Talia's there. I talked to her this morning, right after you called me." That made me feel better. Talia was like an eccentric aunt to those boys, and Freya loved her like a sister. I had to run to keep up with Trevor as he sprinted into headquarters, but I wasn't about to scold him. Freya's time was running out, and we needed to know what Director Pixley knew. We reached the secure area and impatiently went through the entry process before we were allowed in. The director's office was centrally located, no outside walls, and was reinforced with 12 inches of concrete on all 4 sides. It was nearly as safe as the president's bunker. The guards outside his door were not the biggest, or the most muscular, but you just knew if you had to fight them, you would lose. There was something about the steely-eyed glare that never left their eyes, and the fact that they were required to have extensive black ops and sniper experience, to have been a trained assassin, not necessarily for our side, or to possess black belts in at least 2 of the martial arts. All of the above was ideal, and it was smart to assume these 2 gentlemen had checked every box. After our pat-down, which was not unlike being fondled by a Terminator, we were escorted in. Director Pixley sat at his desk, smiling at us as we entered. "Gentlemen, still haven't found our new Agent Douglas?" He tissed his tongue and shook his head, looking at his watch, then back at us. "A little behind schedule, too. You boys are off your game today." I nearly bumped into Trevor. He stopped so abruptly. I quickly moved to stand next to him and joined him in his confused glare at the director. Then, slowly, it began to sink in. After a moment of silence, I found my voice. "Director, you had Agent Douglas kidnapped as a test?" I knew the answer. What I didn't know was who he was testing, Freya or us. "Of course I did." He wasn't smiling anymore. He stood and walked around to the front of his desk, buttoning his suit jacket. He sat on the edge of his desk and studied us for a moment. "This whole situation is completely unorthodox. I had to make sure we were doing the right thing, allowing her to become an agent." He crossed his arms in front of him. "After what I read in her file, well, it was risky, but the only way I could think of to keep her close. Still, I had to make sure she could cut it, didn't I?" He asked this rhetorically, assuming we agreed with everything he was saying. I knew I was more confused than anything. "Sir," I tried, but he cut me off. "I'm disappointed in you, Agent Ripley. I expected you to be able to handle those boys. The chances of her actually being abducted were supposed to be low with you on the job. What happened?" I was pissed. I didn't owe this jackass an explanation. I just needed to find Freya. Sir, do you know where she is? St. Matthias Hospital, in the emergency room. At that, Trevor and I both startled, and the director suddenly realized he needed to clarify. She's fine, gentlemen. She's not the one in need of medical care. Sir! He raised his hand before I could continue. I still can't tell you anything about her file, he informed me. He walked back around to his chair, unbuttoned his coat, and sat. Trevor hadn't moved since we entered, and I was so frustrated with being treated like a child who couldn't keep a secret, I couldn't form a coherent thought. Of course, Pixley sighed as he swiveled back and forth in his white, high-backed leather chair. Probably baby seal, I thought maliciously. If you happen to obtain her file on your own. He opened the top right-hand drawer of his desk and pulled out a very thick manila envelope. He dropped it on his desk with a thud, snapping Trevor out of his trance. Director, I don't think it's wise to share information with Agent Rip. Stop right there, Douglas. Yeah, stop it, Douglas. I'm about to find out what's going on. Pixley didn't say any more, and Trevor had been silenced. I suddenly regained control of my legs and made my move. I stepped forward, grabbed the envelope off the director's desk, and walked out.
You're listening to Big World Network.